Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to the latest chapter of Ars Magica, taken from the subreddit HFY. All the relevant links are down below, and please like, comment, and subscribe like any good minion of the algorithm would do. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. I would just like to thank the following Tier 5 patrons and channel members for supporting the channel: Data Magnet and Bob the Dragon. Thank you again, and now on to the story. Chapter 15. I'm kinda at a loss here. Okay, maybe if I just go over what I did, maybe I could figure out what's going on here. It's better than nothing, I suppose, since I'm stuck here. So after me trying to quickly take care of the commander, it said something. I couldn't really understand the oink growls that well. Then it proceeded to stab me in the stomach multiple times, while I think it was causing my head to progressively pound more and more. Sure, my regeneration helped a bit, but it was getting slower over time. It probably needs energy as much as I do. It was just a matter of how much I had in me to give to it. Now, for the headaches. I couldn't really tell it was adrenaline or not, but it did feel similar to what those mind flecks did to me, just a tad less, put together. So, I just endured it until something changed. With my mental resistance up, there wasn't much else I could do to stop it, except make the orc throw some variety into his attacks, like a punch to a head, a kick to a leg, and things like that. Something did change though, after a while. At one point the orc's attention was drawn away by something while he was stabbing me through the chest again. I don't really know what caused it to. Maybe Kojo was able to grab his attention away. Who's to say at this point? Especially since, well, after that, I thought about what I could do. Then I remembered I had a somewhat ranged spell, my magic spear. I didn't really know how much space I needed, but I definitely didn't have enough. I conjured it anyway, because I figured maybe magic doesn't care about space requirements. I was right, in a way. Making my spear appear just made it go straight through the orc until its length was what it normally was. I was surprised to say the least, and I think the orc was a little bit too. I pulled it out, and I think with the addition of the weapon, it was a little panicked. At least, I assumed so. Why else would it cause every single wolf that he had to just, come at me? At first, I was as scared as hell. I did not want to go all out like that, just being torn to shreds. So, I thought, maybe I could try inspiration again. It did nothing the first time. At that point, I was just panicking. I did not believe that I could handle all those wolves, so I just activated it again as the first one tore into my arm. That was when everything changed in the battle. Information flowed into my brain, and as swift as I could, I put that information into action. To better explain what I did, for a spell, it seemed like it always followed the same type of pattern. As of yet, I haven't even tried to change up the pattern for the weapon, but there was one thing that I was fine with doing. Apparently, the kind of mana you feed to the spell. What I was feeding my magic spear was plain mana from my soul. But if I put it through the decay filter, then magic happens. Suddenly, my plain old spear that did slashing, piercing, and probably magic damage gains one more type of damage. And oh boy, does that damage do something. As soon as my spear butt meets with the skull of the wolf who first bit me, his flesh begins to turn to dust from that point on. At first, I was a bit freaked out. I mean, the most I'd been using decay on was inanimate stuff and trees. Nobody cares about trees. Well, I assume Greenpeace and hippies do, but I doubt any of those exist here. If magic's involved, you can instantly grow a tree back anyway. But doing that to a first wolf, I think it made me realize something. This power I have, that I had tapped into, I don't know if I want to use it. I understand fighting for my life. I understand even killing or maiming. But I just, doing this to the wolves just didn't feel right. So I tried to pull back. I tried to limit the amount of magic I was using. I still used it, but at least it wasn't decaying things as fast or as horrible. Then, if I hit a leg, the leg just stops functioning after a while, and the wolf had to limp over after me. That's enough for me. So I just hit any that got close and barreled through the rest. It worked, but it wasn't fast enough. Somehow the damn orc had sprinted away across to the other side of the cavern. I don't think I'm half as fast as that, but I did have one thing that I could do. I had a spear. And while a spear could be a melee weapon most of the time, there was one thing a spear had over a regular ass pole. It could be thrown. So I did just that. I was a bit concerned, given that Koja had managed to get in front of the orc and just started tearing into him, with a bunch of wolves beside him. I was a bit worried, given that I could hit one of them, but I thought maybe my accuracy ability that I had could do something to compensate. However, there was a bit of a problem with actually just throwing the thing. Magic Spear always seemed to dissipate once I let go of it. I think that it has something to do with the amount of magic I put in. I was somewhat proven right at the point in time, as I just pushed everything I had into it. Sure, it started glowing and causing dust to just come up from everything, but I'd managed to do it. With the spear flying through the air, I knew that I was on the right track with the magic weapon. However, it did in fact just hit the orc a little too hard, in the face, with a lot of decay magic that it just dispensed all at once before dissipating. I don't want to think about the scream of agony that I had heard, nor the pile of ash that floated through the air. It makes me want to throw up. Anyway, after that, every single wolf in the cave stopped, turned towards me, and began running at full speed. The next few moments were a blur for me. I'd used up all my magic, all my stamina. Basically, I'd given everything for this fight, and my regeneration was much slower than normal. So I had a lot of health just shaved off of me. So, with that in mind, and the adrenaline just wearing off, I let whatever come. I was sure that if I died, at least I got rid of the main guy pulling all the strings. And if that's enough for Koja to get the rest of the wolves to back off of him, then so be it. Let whatever come, that may come. And then I awoke like this, lying on my back, thankfully still in the same position, except there's a few important things that my brain notices. It's dark and I can't feel anything, not even my own bodily functions. Basically, I can't hear my heartbeat or feel my breathing. There's just nothing. I mean, this could be a dream, but it's not really like my usual ones. Most of those, I'm just mentioned being in a dream, or even just realize it, and I'm just pulled out. This one, not so much. That could mean a couple of things if I include magical nonsense. One is that it isn't my dream, but someone else's. Hell, that's probably going to be a thing if I keep advancing in meditation-related skills or something. One is that this isn't a dream, and I have exhausted myself so much that even when I'm awake, I could just be sent dead to the world. It would explain why I feel pressure on my back. One could be that I've been found by society, and they've locked me up because of the Senate title. I mean, it could be that. But I haven't seen any Error, MIGW compromised. Finding change. Change found. Beastmaster Garung's premature death. Cause altercation with Chaos Engineer Dave. Situation fix found. Implementing. Done. Chaos Engineer Dave gains 5 class levels for brief error. Chaos Engineer Dave is revoked of title Newcomer. Chaos Engineer Dave is given the title Destiny Breaker. Displaying pre-written declaration. To those who have managed to disrupt the MIGW, congrats. MIGW was basically made to be unchangeable. For reasons I will not disclose what MIGW is. Just know that since you've been able to affect MIGW, you might do so again. Beware of future consequences. Declaration ended, resuming normal parameters. Congratulations for killing legendary class holder. For that, you have been given 10 levels and the title Legend Slayer. For reaching level 50, you have gained 2 benefits. These include the following. You now have the choice of taking another class or increasing the levels of your current one. See available classes, go to class choices. you have also been given an extra 10 stat points to dispense. That's a lot to process. I mean, I guess it was fine of them to get rid of the newcomer title, since I wasn't sure what it did anyhow. Wait, why is everything getting brighter now? Oh, I understand now. I was being dogpiled. Literally. Are they asleep? I listen, but I only hear slight breathing and the occasional thump. Since I'm stuck in here, might as well deal with things that I could deal with. I've got a lot of stat points now, especially since the battle helped me get over level 60. Raised my total count to 99. Should probably use them now anyway, since I don't know if the value system can go higher than 99. Most games I know have a hard cap limits there, so it's best to use them now before I get rid of the ones I receive from leveling. Assuming that I'm right about all of this. I should probably start from the top and work my way down. I don't think strength is all that good, to be honest. Sure, I could get more, but 30 is enough for me. I don't plan on being Arnold Schwarzenegger's model here. I am fine with the current definition I've got. Guess that means next is dexterity. Honestly, I would like to bump it up to 50. If I'm right, my speed will just increase dramatically. Plus a new stat ability is always handy. Also, should probably bring up Constitution to 50 as well. I need all the health that I can get after all, if I'm going to be meeting things that have the classes that I've dealt with. Speaking of, apparently there are legendary classes. That orc, go wrong, I think, was the Beastmaster. Guess that explains why he was trying to dominate my mind, I guess. Anything can be a beast with the right mindset, after all. Also, the titles I've gotten don't make me excited. Sure, I got rid of the newcomer title, but I didn't even know what that thing did to begin with. Makes me think the titles are just for show, literally. It might be a categorization system that the system uses to deal with specific people. Destiny Breaker just probably only follows people who've done what I apparently did. What did I even do, anyway? Was I not supposed to kill Grung? Still feel bad about that. Thankfully, there isn't blood or guts or anything. Otherwise, I'd probably be throwing up a lot more. Also, maybe it's just me, but is it normal to feel this way? To just not care? I mean, it happened. I can acknowledge that, and I can say I remember that I did that. But why do I feel nothing? Should I feel something about killing someone? I was a person who probably had a family and a life of its own. So why can't I feel anything about the action itself? I don't know. I need to take my mind off of this, maybe go over the survival instincts advancement. So, at some point in that fight, I had managed to level my survival instincts all the way. And of course, I went to advance it. Who wouldn't? It helped me so far with finding food based on intuition, and the skill did advance during it. But looking back at what it actually is, strikes me as strange. Survivalism, level 4, 40 out of 100%. Cost, 0 AP. There are people who often take survival instincts to the extreme. These people often take it so far as to make it an art form or a policy of theirs. This is what happens when they take it thus far. The skill provides the user with some knowledge of the 4 fundamentals of survival, as well as a passive boost to most physical skills. I mean, from what I'm getting, there's supposed to be a knowledge in my brain now, but nothing's popping up like it would for inspiration. At least, it also does boost some physical skills I have. Oh wait, I don't have that many. This just seems like a crappy trade-off to me. I don't even have the vague sense of what's edible now or not if I just pull up a picture of a berry. But you know what? It's no good just worrying about something I don't understand. Focus on the things that I can do and do understand, like the allocation of stat points. Might as well do that already. For gaining a dex of 50, you earn the ability Speed. For gaining a constitution of 50, you earn the ability Recovery. Generic sounding names, but alright. What about their descriptions though? Speed, level 1, 0 out of 100%. Nothing and 10 AP. There are times when people don't need strength, where they don't need magic, or even when they don't need others. All they need would be their own body. This can equate to pure strength or pure wit. Either way, these people who obtain this ability can say that their strategy is better with it than without. While inactive, the ability improves reaction time proportional to the level. While it is active, your general speed will improve over the duration it is kept active. Recovery, level max, cost 50 AP. There are times in which having a good spell or a special affinity isn't enough, where your body just can't give anything anymore. This is where this ability comes in handy. It can be used for one of three things. One is this ability can perfectly get rid of all instances of poison at once. The second is that this ability can recover half of your maximum amount of health. The third and final one is that it can be used to completely recover your total mana. No, they may be generic, they are still good and what I was kind of hoping for. Well, I still got a bit over 50 points to allocate now, but I can think about that later. Right now, I gotta figure out how to get out of this. Dang. Don't think I'll be getting quietly out of this now. There's a wolf head right in front of me, staring at me. End of chapter. Chapter 16. At the end of the fight with the wolves who had been attacking his clan, even those of his clan who had turned on them, they were all sniffing around in confusion, as if trying to catch an elusive scent. Then they looked at him, and Ter found himself as the sole clan leader who had not succumbed to whatever that had been. The others were confused, and when Ter asked his clan to start taking stock of what damage had been done, the other wolves noticed and started following his orders as well. None of those who had been clan leaders gave an opposition. So Ter suddenly found himself to be accepted leader of a larger clan than he had ever seen in one place. He considered it to be a temporary thing, likely to only last until the clan leaders recovered and challenged his right to lead. Because of this, Ter was thinking a lot on his rock. Ter didn't think much of gratitude. Sure, he often gave his family more to fill their bellies if they impressed him or performed better than he thought they might during a hunt. Others in the new clan might think he was being heartless, especially as he was only temporary leader. But it was more a matter of pragmatism for him, even if he didn't know the specific word. He did not waste his time with the pups who could not hunt, nor the lame who could only hinder the movement of the whole. Sure, with some, time is an option. It almost always was. Pups would grow, the lame would strengthen. But this wasn't something that he could fix with time. This was something he had to deal with right now. Nothing could have prepared him for this moment, but he grabbed it by its antlers and forced it to the ground, like he would any hunt. Sorry, but, Ter opened his eyes and readied himself. It was one of the new ones to the clan, someone who hadn't yet received an encompassing scent of the clan. Without a scent, one often had no name, no defining mark. Sure, even without a scent they had names, but having a definitive scent of your pack was more of an instinctual need than a societal issue. The scentless wouldn't have usually been a problem for Ter. Lone wolves showed up now and again, asking for aid or even to be a part of the clan again. He suspected those were ones who couldn't be lone for long. But what was happening was on a much bigger scale than a single wolf coming in. He could not perform a ceremony, nor invite the wolf to hunt to prove his worth. There was just too many for that to be done. All that could be done was to accept them for now and wait for them to prove themselves later. Given this, Ter assumed he knew what the problem was and huffed a sigh at the work ahead of him. Well, what is it? Do you need another huddle to get that scent back on you? No, I'm fine, but he's awake. This confused Ter. Why would one wolf care so much about another singular one? It could have been a mate, but most of the women and children were dead from previous, battles. That was the word that Ter was looking for. It could have been those who had been part of previously rival clan heads, in which case it was indeed probably a huge issue. Who's awake? Is it one of the other clan heads? No, it's our savior. Ter's eyebrows went up a tad. Ah, he thought. That was it. Ter had almost forgotten about the creature that had ended the hunt of terror. Sure, it was in the back of his mind, but after a couple of trying to deal with the tensions between previous rival clans, he just pushed that issue under the carcass. Thinking back on what occurred, he could only grumble. After this day, he might no longer hold a position as clan head. The responsibility of being a leader was not really all that important to him, but it did mean that he could take naps longer than anyone else and get first choice meat of prey. That was usually enough for him. There had been a battle between his clan and an odd assortment of wolves, many belonging to other clans, all working together. Then, from deeper in the cave system, this thing had come out of nowhere and battered away his clan wolves like pups and turned the ones that harmed it into dust. Under normal circumstances, this would have meant that the whole clan would work together to destroy the attacker. But these were anything but normal circumstances. Seconds before the creature's appearance, he thought all had been lost, and that they would be forced to join something that which was more fearful than one of his deepest nightmares. To think the thing that had been hunting them, and apparently every other wolf clan around, was not a rival clan, but an upright. A single upright that took the individuality of a wolf and replaced it with blind obedience to it. He was sure that when he saw its capture his daughter, all was lost. Although there had been a moment's reprieve, although he could scarcely believe it, his son, of all things, had come back and fought for them. Sure, his son may have been different in appearance than before, but Ter could still smell his particular scent. That was Claw, no doubt about it. Although now he appeared to be more like a name of plant than any other. Sure, it wasn't a name born of battle or blood, but it was highly descriptive. When you talked about plant, you knew who you were talking about, especially since the battle. He could scarcely believe the heights to his son's new battle prowess. When he was sent Claw away, he was concerned. He thought that maybe Claw would not be able to survive as a lone wolf. But he was no longer worried. His decision to have him leave the clan was a good one. He had grown from it, after all. The only unfortunate thing in all of this was that in the chaos, he finally realized why Tuft had acted the way he did. He was under the control of the upright as well. It was with sad thoughts his mind returned to when he made good on his promise and tore out Tuft's throat. Ter's mind returned back to the present, however, as he realized he'd been staring at the wolf in front of him as he processed this. Unfortunately for the scentless, Ter's thinking face was also its hunting face, and that long moment of silence was enough for the scentless to finally gain a scent, and it wasn't all that pleasant to smell. Ter realized that it was his own fault, so he didn't ostracize the pup, but there was something he had to do first. "Bring me to it." The wolf nodded resolutely before leading him past the other members of the new clan resting up. Most had given their all for this fight. Others seemed to have given up, given in to the oppressive feeling that they had within their skulls. Ter gave those wolves a couple hours to make some sort of recovery before calling their time. He still remembered the 9 bodies he had led gently to drown. They had died as warriors. They would be remembered, of course, in stories, but it would not do for their coats to be as patchy as their minds before heading off to Onda. He stared at the wounded licking their wounds, and the wolves who sat quietly staring at something only they could see, and the crying ones, begging for their pups and mates to come back. It was enough to drive any clan head to tears if they heard it. Thankfully, most of the old heads had been moved to a separate part of the home. Those who weren't wounded too much to be able to walk at least. He wasn't headed to that part, however. He was heading towards the lake that was located further out from their home. It was the closest source of water and of the life moss. It was also where they had moved many of the wounded who could not remain awake because of their pain. Those included, more often than not,
the many who had lost paws and teeth. It was a gruesome sight to any, but Ter had grown used to it. He feared that he may become uncaring after long, because if this kept up, all the life moss would shrivel from how much they were taking. The creature had been in dire state when it was brought here. According to his son at least, the thing could heal itself given enough time. So any wound it might have occurred during the battle would soon long be gone. That did not mean he had energy though, so they moved him to the water. There, Blanc stayed by his side for hours. When Ter had begged him to come and help in the recovery, he had refused. When Ter had asked why, Blanc's only response was that he was indebted. Ter did not fully understand what debt was, but he felt like it was probably something akin to gratitude. So he let Blanc be and returned to stopping the infighting. That was hours ago, and he had feared what might have occurred here when he was away. Thankfully, nothing seemed to be amiss as he returned. The life moss lighting the ceiling had recovered a bit. No one had yet cleaned up the broken bits of rock over from the markings that they had caused making laying stones. And the water still held its fish, nibbling away at more of the bigger insects. The only thing that seemed to be a problem to Ter was that most of the laying stones had no one upon them. Blood was still fresh upon the ground, so Ter assumed that most had died in the time he'd been gone. This troubled Ter, as he wasn't too sure how to perform mass honor rites. It had been a while since his elder teachings, and most of the elders had been killed during the Hunt of Terror. Only about 4 remained, and they always seemed to be bickering near a corner of the cave about some oft-begotten head of yore who did something that he couldn't for the life of him remember. So, with a heavy heart, growing heavier with each empty seat they passed, he was brought up short by the sight at which he could barely dare to believe. All of the wolves, all of his clan, and even some that were not, were still alive. They'd even gotten their lost limbs back, and some had even gotten their teeth. This seemed strange to Ter. Sure, he was happy that they had recovered, but life moss never worked this fast, and it never restored a wolf's teeth. So he ran ahead of his tentless guide, pushing and shoving through the crowd that was gathered by the shore. He couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything. The sheer amount of wolves talking was too much for his old ears, and his senses were being discombobulated. It was only after he saw the telltale grin of his son that he regained control. "Stop!" Instantly, all the wolves grew silent and began to stare at him. Some were part of the original clan and bowed their heads in respect, while others had no clue what this one wolf was trying to pull here. That is, until the shadow of ignorance fell on their face and they too bowed their head. It was like a ripple in a pond spreading out, wolves taking notice and stopping what they were doing to pay respects. With a more steady gait, he more easily walked through the crowd, wolves parting before him, not wanting to get his ire. Some younger ones were too excited to see him and tried to get his attention, but he ignored them. There were more important things here than catering to the whims of a single wolf. He could feel it in his soul. Something about this moment was important. He just didn't know what. He looked at his son, standing by the thing's side. For some reason, Plant was speaking to the thing like it could understand him. That, however, stopped when Plant finally noticed him. "What happened?" Plant towered over his father. Ter had almost directed his question towards another wolf, but he figured that he should at least directly talk to his son. "Friend here just did some healing. He's a shaman, so I asked if he could do it." Ter looked at the fox upright. Its face, it was hard to tell for Ter, but it seemed almost constipated. "You asked him?" Plant nodded before lying down so his head was at eye level to his father. "Yes. He's able to talk to me. Don't know why he can't understand anyone else." This almost sounded like what the other upright was capable of, to Ter at least. All of his followers were able to understand his orders, from what he could get, but it was more of a head thing than actually speaking. Is he? No, don't worry about that. He is not like that. The thing turned towards Blonde and started barking. It almost sounded like a wolf, but it was, different. Its barks were more varied than the wolves. Sure, wolves were able to convey a lot with just a few particular emotions applied to certain howls, but these were more articulated. This thing could move its tongue in ways that wolves could not, and that was enough for a multitude of concepts better applied to different words. It kind of sounded like no. Dare put that thought away. It's best to stay in the moment and remember that nightmare. He says he's sorry about those he killed. He felt that by doing this he'd, be square. Fair. Plant nodded vivaciously as he laid down beside the thing. So this thing, his name is Friend. Silence stretched for a while. No one would dare interrupt the clan head, as the clan heads were known for fits of violence. Thankfully, Ter didn't take this too personally. He just realized how caring Plant was to his new follower. Really? That's his name? I know. When I was first told it, I couldn't believe it either. Well, tell him that we, appreciate the help. There have been enough dead in the hunt of terror. Plant nodded before repeating his words to Friend. Ter followed the changes on the face of Friend. His face was very expressive. Sure, he couldn't recognize what some of the facial muscles represented, but he realized this thing probably didn't rely on scent as much as the average wolf. He's asking if we're expected to do anything. Friend was looking at Ter expectantly, for what he wasn't sure. No, he's done enough for us as it is. Right now is a time for recovery. There's too much tension here. Too many clans with too many ideals. We need to fix this, and that needs time and effort. Something which I'm sure he can't give, given he can only talk to you. While Plant translated, Ter looked at Friend in the eyes for the first time since the thing had shown up. As the words were spoken, Ter could sense no change in Friend's intensity nor in its face. Nothing seemed to give away what it was thinking, and even if it did, Ter doubted that he could tell with the weird face. And, at the end of it all, Friend nodded towards Plant, stood up, said a few short growls, and started walking towards one of the laying stones, sat on it, and closed its eyes. He said he's sorry that he couldn't do more. He doesn't want to be, in your hair. I think that means to be a problem from how he said it, but I'm not sure. Either way, he says he's going to be leaving at the earliest. He doesn't want to bother you more than he already has. Ter looked back towards Plant. Even with his son's enhanced size, Ter could tell that he was sulking. Even in a different body, the same characteristics tend to come to the surface. Why are you sad, Plant? I thought that he would stay here. He liked me, so I figured he might not back down when it came to your wishes. Seems he and I are different like that. Yeah, I suppose so, my son. Even though I gave an order a long time ago, I need to tell you something. Ter debated whether or not to continue, to splurge his emotions out in front of the rest of the crowd. Eventually, he managed to find the words that he wanted to say. You can still be by yourself if you want. Try to do something great with yourself. But I want you to know this. Even if you haven't founded a clan yet, or even got a mate, you've still made me proud, just by being who you are, and by achieving what you've become. Ter laughed for a while at the end before turning his attention to the rest of the crowd. Well, if you're all right now, I guess there's no further delay in this then, Ter breathed. Go on and hunt ready. The crowd, a bit taken back, quickly ran over each other towards the entrance of the cavern to take down the biggest prey that they could find. Even in their fear-addled minds, they knew that the clans needed the biggest amount of food that they could find. It wasn't every day that they all came together, after all. Why are they going? I told them how to make it through the Purple Room and beyond, as well as how big the prey there is on the other side. They should be fine if they're all smart enough. Tear sighed a bit before looking back towards his son. Before speaking, though, he noticed that Friend's eyes had opened in an almost manic expression. He was no longer sitting on a rock, and he was raising his front leg ahead of him. Tear chuckled before speaking once more in a hushed tone. "Thanks, and keep an eye on your friend. He may be a savior, but his reflexes seem to be lacking." And with that, Tear gave his son one more nuzzle before heading back into the main cavern. He had a lot to deal with, after all. As he finally reached the entrance, he looked back and took notice of the rocks again. This time, no fits of terror or sadness hit him like before. Only pride, and perhaps, if he was being honest with himself, a smidgen of gratitude. End of chapter. Chapter 17. So, didn't really expect that to happen. Honestly, when I woke up from the wolf's face in front of me, I thought I was about to get eaten while I was in that weird pseudo-world thing. Thankfully, I was just being treated for injuries near the best indoor lake that I've ever seen and the best damn cave that I've ever been in. Well, I haven't been in many caves to begin with, but I've seen them online, and I'd never seen anything like this before. The lights that's coming from the lake and lighting up the entire room. Is this a cave room? Who cares? Anyways, I was just stuck in a dog pile. Literal dog pile. So when I woke up, all the wolves seemed excited around me, but I couldn't really understand them that well. I tried to use animal companionship on some of the more excitable ones, but it turns out it's a singular target thing. I have to switch to the different target animals each and every time, and I can only understand a single animal, basically. I can only have a single companion at a time, so I'd have to switch the target of my companionship each time and could only understand a single wolf at a time, and I called bullcrap on that right off the bat. Cause there's only one animal that I would want to talk to, and that's Kojo. Well, I don't even know if it's right calling him an animal anymore, with how organized these wolves are, and from what Kojo's been telling me, I think that these are some of the world's people. Now, I'm kind of confused as to why there's a skill that labels them as animals, but I'm sure once I find out who actually knows something, I'll be able to at least get a better grasp on what's going on. Speaking of leaving, from what I can understand, and from how the leader of the pack looked, I was not welcomed here. Even with all the healing that I wanted to do for myself and the wolves around me, he wanted nothing to do with me. Sure, I might feel that they should be grateful, maybe obligated to provide me with, something. I saved the proto-village after all. Don't I deserve a part of the feast? Actually, no. Never mind. They don't have silverware or fire, so they probably expect me to eat the meat fresh and raw. Honestly, though, I think they kinda understood what was going on around here, at least. Apparently, there were some wolves that weren't part of the original pack that were being controlled by that one guy. Yeah, I know. I'm still surprised. Apparently their mind stuff wasn't actually me hallucinating or feeling too much pressure from my first battle with an actual person. That guy could control minds, and he had been using that power to take over the wolves. There's something there that I don't know what it actually is, but I know something's wrong with that. Why would you come all the way out here to mind control some animals and settle on the wolves? No offense to the guy, but if I wanted a good mind-controlled minions, I could have gone to a tree and, I don't know, grabbed control of a goddamn leaf falcons, or whatever they are. These are people, and if that guy understood that, then I might be a bit... No, don't say it. Even in your head, you can never say it. Now, where was I before? Oh yeah, we're leaving, and the reason is wolf politics. Actually, it might not be politics. However, I'm imagining some dogs in suits barking at each other on podiums, and it's too adorable not to think about. So I might as well take a moment and imagine the whole thing playing out. With this thought running through my head, I looked over towards Kojo. He's talking with the wolf. I think it's the leader. Or, well, maybe some other wolf. Can't be sure. When he gets back, is he crying? Are you okay, buddy? Do I need to punch him or something for hurting your feelings? Thankfully, Kojo was chuckling a bit at my remark. Good. That's good. I think he's beginning to understand my sense of humor now. Otherwise, I probably could have made a big mistake. Yes, don't worry about it, friend. It's just some emotions coming up. That's not normal. I don't think I ever heard him cry before. Well, what happened? Why are you crying? His face turns to look towards the opposite end of the cave. As he stands up, I can tell there's a little bit of a smile coming to his face. I was saying goodbye. Really? That's it? Yes, I know. I should control my emotions better than... What? No. Let them out, man. Who cares? But the real question is, why was saying goodbye to that emotional? That was my father, friend. A lot of pieces are coming into place now. Why don't you stay there? I think I can get out of here fine with what you said is true about the cave. I'm not meant to. That's concerning. If it's like a fugitive or something, what's the one word describing a person that was ejected from the community? I'll think of that later. Right now, gotta focus on my buddy. Did, he force you to go? No, I wasn't forced. I was just, something that had to be. I could be punishment, or it could be a weird ritual thing. That definitely sounds false to me. It wasn't. I agreed with him. Kojo begins walking towards the exit, presumably. I'll just trust him on this judgment. He's even living in the cave for a while now, so he knows best. After a while, though, the silence just becomes too much to bear for me. All right, if you say so, when did you leave? A few days ago. Wait, sorry? Before I ask the question that are kinda serious, it was literally days ago, and now you're crying. Well, yeah, I'm comfortable doing that now. My eyes are drawn to the glowing moss on the ceiling and the fading glow as we exit the chamber. Idly, I wonder whether or not we should go back and get some fish for sustenance. But there's probably going to be a lot of good food coming up anyway. I draw my attention back to the green form I call friend. You weren't before. Kojo turns to look at me. No, I never was. Now I think I'm able to. Because of plant magic. He chuckles a bit before turning his head back towards the mild darkness of the cave. Some of it, yeah. And I think I realize what I want to do now that I'm out of the family. What? His moss bristles slightly against the air. Why do you think I'm with you? That's a good question. He could leave any time he wants. Wait. Am I forcing him to? God, please don't let me be controlling this good boy. He's the only friend I have, and I don't want him to just be friends with me because of magical nonsense from my skill. Thanks, dude. Kojo's tail slightly wags a bit before it twigs in and pops back into place. No problem. The least I can do since we met. I guess so. I saved his life several times, but so has he saved mine. Honestly, I don't even want to keep track of it anymore. It would probably just end up as a competition or something. We walked for a while after that. I had no idea what Kojo was thinking during this entire trip, but I know what I have to do. I need to figure out what we're going to do next. Sure, we had a vague plan of fine civilization, but how am I going to fight Kojo? It's not like he's normal. Or at least, I don't think he's normal. From what Kojo has told me, it's been a while since a wolf has ascended. Don't really like the usage of that word, but whatever. I could always just pretend I'm a Beastmaster. No, don't think that'll work out well. If what the system says is true, then he's probably unique enough that no one is going to buy the fact that I'm a Beastmaster. Unless, I have a hunch, it's not really sound, but maybe his class evolved. I mean, I can't figure out much else to do with the separate leveling between me and my class. Maybe, at a certain point, the class becomes something greater. I don't know. Until I find someone that can give me the answers I seek, or even a library. Wait, Even if I find a library, there's no guarantee that the language skill is going to work with writing either. No, Dave, just focus on the current problems, something that is immediate. If this is like any generic fantasy world I know of, there's probably going to be a tamer class. I'll just pretend I'm that. Why not? I can't really think of much else I can do. Plus, if we're going to civilization, then what is Kojo going to do? I don't want to leave him outside in an inn or something, simply because it's too small for him. I don't want him to follow me for the rest of his life. I want him to have his own. Maybe if I ask about the past, I'll get an inkling as to what I might need to do. At this point, the darkness is almost as bad as the trip we went through to get back into the cave. Thankfully, there was enough light from, somewhere, that I could at least tell the general shapes and locations of things, even if I couldn't see much detail. That meant that it was relatively easy to find Kojo in the darkness. Turning my head towards him, I opened my mouth to ask one of my more pressing questions. So, important question time, I guess. What caused it? Was it me? I know you said you've seen me before. Still crazy to me. Kind of. I saw you, let you go, and that was, straw on camel's back. The last straw. But I think you're getting the hang of the idioms. Getting the hang of. Oh, yeah, I see. Sorry that I kind of forced you away from your family. No, with how my family was, I think it was inevitable. Especially since we've been pestered by that one orc for so long. And my sister. Oh, a new juicy tidbit. A sister, you say? I could tell that Kojo twitched a little, but he continued walking like nothing was a problem. Yeah, she's... Kojo seemed to trail off before silencing himself entirely. I waited for a bit, worried he might have found something further ahead in the cavern, but he kept walking. That could only mean one thing, estranged relationship. Really, is it that difficult to talk about her? No, I just don't want to give you the wrong idea. Don't you have siblings before? The question caught me a bit off guard, but I marched on. No, best not to think about things best forgotten. Huh, that's a shame. Would have been at least somewhat helpful when explaining her. He stopped for a bit before I could hear him sighing heavily. She is intense. She took everything seriously. Every slight against her, whether or not you intended it, it was usually paid back tenfold at what she thought was fair. She held everyone to a standard that only she and a select few could meet. And she always tried to, pick on me. So, an older sister? No, younger actually. That's kind of the reason I left to begin with. Much more passionate than most. She wanted to become the new clan head at the time I left. My father and I think she's been spoiled too much, but we don't want to see her hurt. That's why I left. With how the clan head is usually picked out, things tend to get deadly. And I would much rather my sister not have to kill her brother, or I, her. What do I say to that? I don't have a frame of reference for this. Well, do you regret leaving? Do you regret trying to protect your sister? Kojo stops walking forward. I stop as well, mostly because if I hadn't, I would have bumped into him. No, Moon is alive still. That is something I can't thank Onda enough for. Just seeing my sister slumber peacefully was enough for me to relax. Even if she came close to death the other day, with your help, she still lives. Some questions, I suppose. Dude, how did I help her? Kojo let out a scoff. You did not have to help my family fight for their minds. You did not have to heal my family back to the prime and remove aches and pains they dealt with for most of their lives. Believe it or not, friend, you are a helpful existence. Yeah, I guess I did help, even if it was just some wounds. Thanks, Kojo, for your words. Not many people had appreciated me for what I did. Kojo chuckled a bit and resumed his pace. I followed along as he continued lambasting. They should. It's not every day that a wise man is born, you know. Wise man? Wise men aren't born, buddy. They're made, and I hardly qualify. Kojo seemed to muddle over the sentence I said. I say seemed because I have absolutely no idea why else his head would tilt like that. I suppose. Silence stretched out after that, only briefly interrupted by the drips of water. Thus we ventured on in comfortable silence. Sometimes I think I see something besides us in the cave, but I can't hear anything regarding that. Plus, Kojo doesn't seem to notice it, or if he did, it isn't worth much thought. So I just continue on behind him. This went on for quite a while, so I decided that this was probably the best time that I could do to better investigate myself. What do I investigate, though? There is not much that I can do by myself, unless, do skills have an effect on my soul, or whatever it is. I mean, most don't use any of my magic. Wait. Something's changed. My MP bar's changed. It's more of a, sphere now. Did I do that? When was the last time I even looked at that? Why did it change? Is it my perception? Before I thought it was just a measure of something, but now I know where it comes from. Do I have a more accurate representation? I kinda don't like that. I like the new form it is, but I don't like that it changed without me even noticing until now. You know what? I don't even know what I could do to stop that kind of thing. This interface isn't exactly easy to navigate through. Most of the things I want to know are just results of me trying things for several hours. If I could change it, I'd probably have found out by now. So, to get away from essentially topics best left for later, do I have a source of AP? I know where MP comes from, and I can actively move it about. So what about AP? Is it just general energy, or is it something else? As I walk through the darkness, I try and peer inside myself. If my mana can be found there, maybe whatever AP is also there. It's worth a try. I see the general amalgam that is my mana and the screens that are my affinities, and the glow is prominent. But that isn't what I'm searching for. I need to find something else here, if there is anything else to find. I search through the, I guess you could call it the darkness. It isn't just the absence of light, but more like the absence of anything that you could call it darkness, as that's basically what it is. But with the feeling that comes with the staring at absolute nothing is not really properly conveyed. It hurts your eyes, or at least whatever I'm using in here, to actively stare at those blank parts. At least it did until I stared in a particular direction, and it didn't hurt for some reason. Curious. Very curious. I slowly move myself over. Wait, how am I moving my perception anyway? Is it like the astral projection I've heard about? Looking down at myself, it doesn't really seem to be the case. I'm not a glowing thing. I just, don't see anything. It's not nothingness, but, I don't see any form. No, Bad Dave, you're on a mission. There's no time for existential dread over how you don't have a body here. Eventually, I think I start to see something. It isn't necessarily what I expected, though. It's a river. It's not really filled with what you'd expect in a river, though. It's not really water, but something green, I think. I think that's it. But I think it's best to stop now. For some reason, my feet have stopped moving, and I can't tell why. I can always come back here anyway. Now that I know its general direction, I can just appear there. So, I open my eyes to, not-so-tall trees, birdsong, and daylight. Completed quest. Escape from Caldara. Depositing rewards. You have gained 10 levels and the title Unbowed. End of chapter.
Chapter 18. This is amazing, Kojo. He turned his head towards me. How? The forest is just a regular forest. He smiled cheekily at me. Well, yeah, but something feels different, almost uplifting. His eyes widen, and he turns his head back towards the landscape. Ah, you're talking about the aura. Wait, hold up. That's a new word. Something that I don't think I've heard before. Is the animal translation stuff actually real-time translating? No, wait. Focus on things that you can get answers to. What do you mean? You know how when we went into that forest, back in that valley, and there were magical plants and weird animals. Weird direction to start with, but alright. Yeah. Well, we entered a domain. Another new word, and apparently no further explanation, judging by how Kojo turned his head back towards the forest and just continued walking. I, of course, follow right behind, but I still need this conversation to happen. What's the domain? He stumbles a bit, his legs missing their rhythm, before finding their pace again. Oh, you must have lived somewhere peaceful then, yeah? Yeah. I mean, we don't have something like a monster walking around, so I think it's alright to say that. Okay, so this might take a while to explain. Do you want to get up on top so that you won't have to focus on anything other than my words? He stopped walking, stooped down, and turned his head towards me. I don't see why not. Thanks for letting me on you, buddy. I begin to climb on, but the moss just starts putting me up in surges. No problem, friend. Just feel like things probably need to be said and asked. At the final note, I found myself laying down on his back. So, why is it so important that I sit down? Kojo stands back up and starts walking with purpose once again. It's a bit hard to time myself to the rhythm of his walk, but I eventually get the hang of it. Do you know what a god is? Getting a bit sociological there, but I guess maybe they exist here or something. Maybe it's just a natural phenomenon they can't explain. Sure, Kojo. At this, his back loses some tension I didn't realize it had. Good. I didn't know what I could say to explain that bit to you. That makes things easier to explain. So, a god likes to be in certain places, yes? He stops and sniffs around a bit before continuing on. Is he, asking for my opinion on this? How am I supposed to know? I mean, I guess. Certain gods like certain places more than others. They influence that spot so much, it starts to gain their traits. That is what that inner part of the Caldara was. So, a domain is a place where a god likes to be. He shakes his head a bit, causing his torso to shift, and me to slide around a bit. No, simply a place a god likes. That particular bit was some place a god liked a bit too much. It put a lot of aura in there. That is why it is a domain. It is filled with something that feels different to other normal places. Ah, so there's somehow just a sort of pressure differential then. Makes a bit of sense. Thanks for telling me about it, Kojo. No worries. If you didn't know, then you'd probably die later on. That makes me slightly worried. Is there a reason I'd die? Are domains a normal thing? No. From what my family says, domains are a few and far between. It's just that those that do exist tend to hold the most dangerous predators and hard to catch prey. Ah, so probably more of the same from what we had to deal with in there. Oh, okay then, I'll be sure to be careful if we come around any of that. So I've got to ask something, Kojo. Sure. Why did you want me on your back for that? It didn't seem like too much of a difficult thing to answer. Simple. I lied. You're just slow. It is easier just to carry you to where we are heading. Wait, is he saying I'm fat or something? No, he's not like that. Plus these days in the wilderness ain't exactly bad. I'm just glad that I was able to make a little cup of water in the cave. Without it, I don't think I would have been able to go this far. The crafting skill made it a bit easier to do, so I'm happy with it now. As we pass between the trees and the birds swoop low to grab the insects clinging to the branches of the trees, I ponder some of the things I've put off thinking about.
For example, why did I only receive half of the points I normally get for leveling up? I should have gotten 20, but I only received 10. Was that the effect of my newcomer title? How can I tell unless someone can explain titles to me? I already tried asking Kojo about it, but he didn't know anything about them. And now I'm looking at my skills list properly and looking back at the system history. Why hasn't my physical resistance skill leveling up? It's level 10 now, so I should have gotten an update from the system. But I haven't received anything. I mean, I assume it should still be leveling up, as if it was actually done. It would say that a level was maximum, but it doesn't. I don't know. I just wish I could talk to someone about skills. Wait, I haven't asked Kojo about that yet, have I? Hey, Kojo. He didn't make any abnormal movements, but his ears do turn towards me. Yeah. Do you know about skills? Yes. Why do they sometimes not level up? Level? Do you mean advance? No, I mean level. Like you can tell when it's getting better. But it's not for some reason. At this, his ears turn back. Ah, that is just practice and other skills helping it along. I don't think he's getting it. Wait. How do you know about skills anyway? At this, his head seems to tilt to the side slightly. Why wouldn't I? Well, I mean, this is gonna seem silly. What? Do you have a little screen that appears in front of you when you say certain words or phrases, like stats? Oh, don't worry, friend. That is just the voice of God. No, it's, wait. It was a voice to start off with before I turned to the written notifications, somehow. I still don't quite understand if I did it right or not. I could try and show him what I mean, but would he even have an option to do so? I mean, I didn't see any writing in the caves, even if it would have been primitive or crude because of their claws. Kojo's voice once again snaps me out of my remunerations. Why would you think that was silly? Where I come from, we don't have anything like this unless, wait, how do I phrase this? I can't just say video games. Wait, I know. It's from stories. Strange. Your kind must have been torn from it a long time ago. Torn? What do you mean by torn? His pace slows down a bit as he starts to inspect the trees. Keep in mind that most of what I've heard is basically stories, but there are some things that can't hear the voice without outside help. These are mainly things like rocks and trees that surround us. There are things which can hear the voice, but it almost never makes itself known unless something unusual were to happen. Like for me and mine. Then there are things which can always hear the voice. They are usually uprights, like yourself. Didn't expect that impromptu lecture, but I can welcome it. Plus, it answers some things about how other people might be, considering. What does it have to do with being torn? The torn are a myriad of things that used to be able to hear the voice. Whether on their own actions or the actions of others, they have lost the ability to hear the voice. Usually, anything torn is ignored, as more often than not is inconsequential, unless it's an upright. Then things happen. Things. I wonder if we can elaborate. This could be a nice cover story or something. What things? I don't know. Some say gods do not like it when an upright becomes torn. Others say that it is a punishment. It is hard to know when the elders do not agree on the facts. Oh, I'm just fishing for information that doesn't exist, aren't I? Sorry for quizzing you, bud. Everything is just confusing for me here. I understand. From what you say, most things are new now. His moss ripples slightly as we pass by a patch of sunlight, and with that one ripple, I'm reminded of something that I put in the back of my mind. I still have that weird green river that I have to look at. Hey buddy, I'm going to try to do some introspection real quick. You okay being by yourself?
Don't worry. Most things in the forest do not bother those that are bigger.
Well, I guess that is much reassurance as I'm going to get. Best to start.
I close my eyes and head into myself. It is far easier than any other time I've done it, but that might just be attributed to me getting used to doing it. This time, however, it seemed I was able to instantly transfer between my soul and whatever the green river was. Handy to know. I try to shift the liquid inside the river like I move my mana in my soul. Nothing seemed to happen. Maybe I need something other than my will. Should I use my mana to move it? I was jostled out of it by Kojo. I felt like I was close to a breakthrough, damn it. What's the matter, Kojo? Why are you moving around so much? I opened my eyes to find no more trees, much more sunlight, and perhaps the most startling thing of all. There, in the distance, in the middle of the plain, was the road. Well, I haven't been here since I was a pup after all. This is usually where other uprights cross. To where? Why? I don't know. Thanks, Kojo, for taking me this far. No problem. I just hope you know what you're doing. Most uprights do not like me. I doubt they would even now, considering how big I've gotten. Yeah, don't worry about that. I have a plan for that. Bullcrap my way through it. Like most difficult things in my life, I stood up off of Kojo's back, tentatively walking forward, and laid my hand on top of his head. The wind seemed to gently breeze across my face. It was calm, peaceful. Nothing could ruin this. Frick! Why the hell did a sack fall from the sky onto my head? Crap! Completed quest. Find civilization. Depositing rewards. You have gained 100 GP. You have gained the skill Common Language. You have gained the option for a second class. End of chapter. Chapter 19. The stench of burning filled the air. The house had come down on them all. There were several people being treated from the collapse, but the one who was receiving the most treatment was the one who had been thrown into the war. She was the one that Marshall cared the most about. He could still remember the events that all led up to this, if only something had gone differently. Marshall! He looked away from the scene to find Beckon, one of the people who had followed him into this mess. Yeah, Beckon. She looked almost sad as she stared into his eyes. It wasn't your fault, you know. May wasn't in control of her actions. You know that. The words strike a chord in him, but he's torn from any piece of those words might have brought him by the response from the other person who had come into this with him. Screw that noise, Beckon. We should have known something was off from the moment this all started going down. Ghosts speaking directly into your head. Migraines almost every time we took a break. The signs were there. We just weren't paying attention to them. At that, Marshall looked towards Grull, who was standing over the odd substance that used to be the perpetrator. Grull was sifting through the remains, trying to search for something. Grull, you can perhaps stop going through the murderer's ashes or whatever they are. Grull looked towards Marshall. All right, Marshall. Still, I can't believe what all of this trouble was for. He stared at the impression in the wall, bigger than the body stuck inside of it. Yeah, I got at least some of it. It was an automated carriage for Noralik's sake, even if it wasn't an ungodly shade of pink. Beckon walked towards the outside of the building's ruins. There, in the middle of the street, was the entire reason behind all of this chaos and mayhem. The work of the late Tinker Feeler, or at least that was the assumption. She did try and keep it safe. She must have known that our pup was coming for her. She had all the riddles and magical locks that anyone could afford with her job. He gestured to the glowing chains that were in the back of the official government carriage. Growl glowered at Marshall. his attempt at levity wasn't at all that successful. The actual way to find this place wasn't through a haphazard riddle, but a scavenger hunt of them, layered through all the people she'd ever worked with. It was utterly ridiculous, paranoid, and, apparently, necessary for this one man. Still, didn't stop us from interfering with it, did it, Marshal? Just had to do what the ghosts were saying, had to follow their exact instructions to solve the murder. Growl was mopping on a piece of rubble, staring at the sandy remains that used to be Hank. Marshall walked over towards him and put a hand on his shoulder. The pup? No. Hank was basically controlling our every movement. The only reason any of us got out alive today was due to the sheer luck and quick reflexes on my part. Don't beat yourself up about any of it. If it was anyone else, I'm sure that Hank would have gotten away to perform more acts of mayhem. He was saying words he didn't actually believe now, but he felt like in the future they might become true. Beckon walked back towards the vault, which was the only thing standing mostly unharmed from the collapse. She traced a finger alongside the interior while her ears twitched. You know, I still don't know how likely it was for whatever Hank was using to something of a wizard, Marshal. But I gotta say, shouldn't we have received something from the VOG about this? I mean, it's not every day that our resident consultant gets a class change to wizard. Marshal's tail twitched slightly as he fought his emotions leaking to his face. He was not really a wizard. He could not control the flow of mana. Whatever the stuff he'd used was, it wasn't mana. Sure, it glowed like mana and acted like it, but once it ran out of power, it had returned to whatever it was before it gained that state. At most, he gained some new skills relating to that substance, but he'd rather have a reader help him with that. Plus, it wouldn't do for news to get out that anybody could become a wizard without rupturing their soul. Millions would flock for the chance of power without having to pay any price for it. You know, besides that, there is one thing that is bothering me. Everyone turned to Growl as he stepped towards the odd sand-like remains once again. Where exactly did he get the stuff? That was the question, wasn't it? The stuff let you rebuild missing body parts with a thought, and it could be levitated to do whatever things you thought of in the air. You wanted a fireball, it made a fireball. You wanted just to keep chucking metal spears through the air, you could do that too. This was versatile, highly useful, and most likely the best of what was being made today. Something that a thief like Hank couldn't get his hands on easily, if at all. Yeah, there hasn't been any reports of theft from any court mages. Do you think it was a night market deal? Marshall considered her words. It was more than likely the case, given that most things unknown and mystical would go through there. Especially if the mage that they were looking for wasn't highball enough to get the money to continue their experimentation with the benefits of the courts. That would have been a perfect place to sell illicit substance. Maybe get rid of prototypes taking up space. The only problem was, if that was sold in the night market, I fear what the actual thing might be. Growl's words seemed to strike a chord of concern in all of them as they looked back at the substance. Sure, they were trying to act like they were fine, or even that they had everything under control. After the fight that they had, and the mess of cleanup afterwards, no one could be unconcerned. Marshall's mind was still stuck back in the middle of the fight. The scream of his partner as she hit the wall and the sudden silence afterwards. The nonchalance of the villain getting the carriage back out of the wall without even disturbing the body. The utter compliance he and the others felt as they were forced to bend under his will. This was not the effect of a skill, but the substance that had been flowing through their skin every night. It was sheer chance that Marshall's batch hadn't fully taken. So he ended up being the only one who could fight the fiend. It was just a throwing match for a while until parts of his body began to chip away. First, his tail had been cut off, then his hand. It wasn't until he saw the damage that was being done to Hank that he got the idea to heal those missing pieces. Even now, he couldn't help but rub the places where the substance just changed into flesh. It felt like it, but for some reason, his soul didn't feel like reaching that place. After that, the ending was basically determined after Hank became impatient. He sent the substance into an arc around him, trying to strike through all of them. This had added an effect for two things. The first was that the building supports were destroyed. The second was that he put his all into this attack, literally becoming whatever the substance was, to kill them all. However, Marshall was still able to control it, even in this wave attack form. He was able to take it all and scrunch it back into the middle where it is now sat. The substance began reforming, and Marshall was scared that it wasn't enough. It started from chest, but it couldn't get past the legs. It made arms, but they weren't right. They were different sizes from each other, and slowly shifting to get to the same size. The worst part was the head. The head would stay in Marshall's nightmares. It started wide, squat, before becoming tall and elongated, and then settling on the original shape of the head. Its mockery of a mouth open to belt out, what am I? I am the past. I am happy. Throughout it all, the voice shifted pitch and volume while the head began losing coherency, along with the rest of the body. The thing's misshapen smile as it deformed was still burned into his brain. Marshall could swear they were staring directly at him, if the eyes hadn't started spitting out. Whatever that thing was, I do not want anyone to face anything else like it. Marshall turned to the orc beside him, who was gently collecting the substance. Look, it's nice that you're still in your head, but we need you here now, Marshall. He looked toward the Eve beside him. I know, Beckham, I know. Something tells me that this is the first of a long spree of disasters. She nodded before kneeling down and patting Grell's back as he heaved. This team of just cars had just encountered something that would etch itself into their souls. It was just this one time. Now, sure. However, if Marshall was right in his thoughts on the direction the wind was blowing, this would not be the last. Marshall shuddered as he thought about how many more situations like this might be coming, that might already be happening. End of chapter. Chapter 20. Excerpt from a treatise on titles granted by the divine grace to Cronulus in his 14th year. For those of you who have gotten into this book, hi. Welcome to the part where I talk about titles. In this chapter, I'll be the main writer. I am Cronulus Winter, priest of Quila. Now before you head onward, I want to address some concerns of yours. For example, why is a priest of a god of knowledge allowed to put his words into paper? Why is someone so young allowed to write in such an extensive book? Well, I'm almost quite as shocked as you are, to be honest. I never expected to be given this kind of opportunity before. But when I chose to follow Quila, I followed his every decree, including this one. If you have a problem with it, I would take it up with the church, not me. Anyway, I guess before we get into the grit of this whole issue, I think I should first talk about how titles are actually received. As of now, there are only 4 publicly known ways that a title can be acquired. To better illustrate how you could get a title of your own, I am going to be delving into the ways from the hardest to the easiest. That way, you can go get yourself one soon, if you desire one. The first way to receive a title is that you must do something that is noticeable in the god's eyes. What do I mean by that? Well, say you're a commoner and you are able to defeat an enemy general in single combat. That could get the attention of Durak, and he might bestow upon you a title worthy of your action. It could also occur that you give service towards a particular god through their church, that your dedication was noticed by the god, and he would bestow a title based on that service. This is how I received my title of pious. The second way to receive a title is that you must perform such an action that the voice of the gods takes notice. This is usually an easier task to accomplish than gaining the direct attention of God, since they are often busy doing godlike things, and the voice of the gods has more of a presence in the world outside of the areas where the god has a direct influence. It can also be simpler, since the voice of the gods is known to catalog titles that people have procured. So, for example, if someone acquired a title from the voice of the gods, another person could perform the exact same actions and they may be awarded the title as well. This works well for titles of rank 3 below. A rank 4 title would require you to utilize the previously mentioned option to attract the direct attention of a god to acquire that title. The third way to receive a title is by receiving and completing a quest. Yes, I know. It may not seem like much, but I'm sure that you know as well as that titles that can be received from the quest aren't necessarily good ones. In fact, some have speculated that those titles can only go as high as rank 3 on occasion, due to luck or godly influence. No one knows. So, for a more interesting usage of our time, I'm going to be mainly talking about the fourth way to receive a title. The final way is to have people themselves bestow it upon you. That is the one that is still being put under careful testing, even now. Titles that can be received from people can have an effect that range up to rank 4 titles, or even above. The problem is you can only have 1, or maybe 2 titles given to you by people. There is also an additional issue regarding this method, as a title cannot be bestowed onto a person by a single person, or even a small group of people. It has to be done by at least a village worth of people before it actually takes effect. This means that the number of people who agree to bestow a title upon you matters. This can explain why the knighting ceremony can have such an impact on an individual. It also explains why some children are stuck with the title until given a replacement or maturing out of the childish one. Thankfully, such bestowed titles can be removed eventually if the people who bestowed the title no longer think that the recipient deserves the title, or if one could go into an influencer. However, this also means that a person now has a free slot that they can replace with any actions that they want to perform to make the desired title more likely to appear. This is the main application into which I am studying, and following this brief explanation of title acquirement, I want to head into personal accounts of people when they receive their titles, how their experiences differ from each other, and, if the information is available, give the effects of their titles. I hope that whoever is reading this can at least gain some insight into the... Marvel was having a rough time of it. Sure, it wasn't like it was the worst position to be in, but all the same, it still bothered him that he got kicked out of yet another city. It wasn't his fault that his wares caused havoc in the kitchen. He was selling magical items after all. If they didn't work like they were supposed to, that was the fault of the maker, not the seller. He thought he had spelled it out pretty well in the documentation, but he might just need to explain it further or more obviously call attention to it. Documents were something that common people weren't used to after all. He sighed as he traveled with the well-trodden road. His carriage was rattling under him as pebbles and rocks scattered away from the wheels, despite the pickers that were pulling it going along at a leisurely pace. It seemed to him that if he really wanted to go into better detail regarding his wares, he'd have to get rid of his title. He blamed the thoughtlessness of his youth for giving him the title, which was not of much use anymore. Sighing, he reached into the compartment behind his bench, where he kept the most glorious of beverages, his Spict. Spict wasn't a drink for many. In fact, this bottle was Marwal's own version of it, which for some reason seemed to make it worse. But it did have a certain alcoholic edge that he felt he needed right now. He wasn't going to reach the next city for a couple hours after all, and even after that, there were lines. He groaned at the thought of sitting, waiting, in the line to get back into the city.
He swished his spit around before he put his head back and down and gulped. As he drank, he remembered the cost of his hubris. Grumbling, he pulled up his statistics and stared hard at the bleeding thing that had stuck to him all these years. Mute. He couldn't imagine how hard it was going to be in the future then. He had thought that maybe it was fine to be a mute. After all, one can get a lot across without words. Sure, he knew how to talk back then, but he never really thought it was all that too useful. Now, ever since his childhood days, and multiple people mistaking his choice for an incapability, he'd been voice-struck. He knew it wasn't really right to blame the people who gave him this title. For how he acted when he was young, he was sure that it wasn't too far off the mark if someone had just met him. That's why he was selling magical devices after all. When you're in a particular market, you get to meet particular people. For one, he didn't really much care for those he sold to. It was an aloofness that you can only get after 30 years of doing the same thing over and over again. The real people he cared about were his suppliers. They were the ones who he needed to convince so that he could get rid of this accursed title. Sure, he didn't have enough money for an influencer. But if he scraped and bowed enough, surely the Scions would make a device to replace his voice. If they couldn't, then he simply picked up shop and moved to a different supplier. Scions were a dime a dozen nowadays. After Grelin decided to bless a generation, he sighed again before taking another swish of his spit. Yeah, that's what he told himself. It was really the only way to feel better about being a slave to the economy. This isn't the class he wanted, after all. He wanted to be a monk. But apparently they don't allow anybody to have negative titles attached to them. Something about negativity impacting the soul. Bah! What use did they have, he thought. It wasn't like they were already silent to begin with. It's not like I couldn't have gone there and learned their ways. No, just because of this one goddamn title. He took another swig. If only... His remunerations were cut short as he realized that he saw another person on the road. He couldn't really tell what kind of carriage he was driving, but he was at least able to tell that it was green in color. He only really left 3 options for him as to what the driver was like. Either it was a person who was magically inclined enough to make a carriage out of living wood, a person wealthy enough to buy living wood, or just someone with poor taste in paint colors. The last was more likely in his mind, so he anticipated what he knew was going to come. It was built into him, after all. The wanderer is welcome. If it's anything that I like about being a merchant, it's this. He still remembered the first time he performed one, how he was basically sheltered and given food and drink for a night. It was a welcome kindness that most travelers knew. Whoever was the most well-off would be the one to treat the other with a day of travel together and a night of revelry before going their separate ways. Sure, it might have mattered at what level the other people might be, as it could be some village kid trying to make it after stuff happened. Gods know that happened. I really wish this guy is down on his luck. If anything, it's the only real pleasure I get, helping other people. Reminds me how well off I am, even if my goal hasn't been reached yet. As he approached, though, his alpacas began to get nervous. It wasn't really all that hard for him to tell. The thing was practically shaking every step it took. Marwell had to give it to the beast. Even if it was slow, it was loyal and determined. Although he did wonder what could make an alpacas shake in fear. He bought the largest beast, after all. It should deter most animals that run under the road. If anything, it should be quite a bit difficult for anything to make it get this afraid. Unless, usually, because the alcohol-induced blurring of the drinker's facilities, it might have taken a bit longer to realize what exactly it was until it was right in front of him. After all, spit is known for a sort of thing. Well, the tasting downright disgusting. It was absolutely brilliant to plow a man straight into the middle ground of a drunken haze. However, Marwell had grown used to the drink fairly quickly. If he wasn't known for being a merchant, he would have probably been known for his great constitution, which was also a product of his childhood, funny enough. So while other men might mistake the object that he was approaching as a carriage until it was right in their face, he realized exactly what was causing the alpacas to be afraid. There wasn't another carriage driving along the road. That was a monster. End of chapter.
And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.